For the state's next witness, this is the lead crime scene investigator, Christopher Michael Shaw. Let's go in together.
Working crime scenes with another certified crime scene investigator.
Almost like being an apprentice in some ways.
It is, because they require 40 hours as well, which I completed at the Gwinnett County Police Department in their crime scene investigation unit. So once I have all those hours, so right there is close to 300 hours just in basic formal training. That's not counting all the time that I'm working with another crime scene investigator, learning my craft. That's taking pictures, mapping crime scenes, that's looking at lots of latent prints, dusting for latent prints, and all that stuff that comes along with the types of investigations that we do here in Cherokee County. And so you complete that, the state sends you back a certificate saying, congratulations, you're now a state certified crime scene investigator.
Now, when you're certified, is that where everybody gets a trophy, or is it you just show up and get it, or does it actually have standards and difficulties?
No, you have to pass the classes, and they require a practical and a cognitive test during the fingerprinting portions. Photography requires a cognitive and a practical exam to pass the class, and if you don't pass those, you get sent home. And you have to wait a year to take them again.
What kind of practicals and tests and things do you do?
During the fingerprinting portion, during classification, you have to classify 10 fingerprint cards, and so when I was going through in 2009, we were still doing the Henry classification. That is a manual classification that was created back in the 1800s by Henry in India to ensure that the workers in the British-controlled Indian continent were getting paid and not having people come and double dip and take money. And so we've taken that classification. We use that worldwide, and we had to do that by hand. And you have to get all 10 right. And if one's wrong, that's it.
Did you have to do like oral presentations, anything like that?
Not during the basic classes. That was in my advanced classes that I go to later.
So after basics, you're qualified as a state at the lowest level, I guess. I don't mean anything against that, just level 1, I guess. Did you go into a more advanced class?
Well, the state only has one level. What they did was they changed some of their prerequisites for the certification, and I took that additional class. And that additional class was the bloodstain pattern and analysis class, and that's a 40-hour basic class. That's your introduction to bloodstain pattern analysis. I went ahead and took it, even though I was grandfathered in under the old state certification. I took that class.
Well, if you didn't have to do it, why'd you do it?
It's important to my craft. It's crime scene, and what we do is a physical science. It's a forensic science. It's constantly evolving and moving. And so if, as a forensics investigator, I don't stay up to date on current trends, I will fall behind, and I will either not see something that needs to be seen, collected, documented, or worse, just completely mess something up in a scene because I'm looking for one thing instead of knowing that the science has changed and changing my way of processing a scene to fit the current sciences.
Do you challenge yourself in your craft and what you do? Do you always try to get better, always sharpening the sword?
When I was running the unit, I read a lot of white pages because the science was changing so fast that I was constantly on the phone with my fellow colleagues going, hey, I ran into this. This is what I did, and I failed miserably in the lab. What are y'all doing? And so constantly bouncing ideas off my fellow crime scene investigators and being able to call them and going, hey, I'm running into this and I'm having difficulty. What do you think? And collaborating with other crime scene investigators to help collect this forensic evidence.
At the time in 2018, were you teaching or educating other people how to do crime scene investigations?
I was. In 2015, I had the opportunity to attend the National Forensics Academy at the University of Tennessee. I'm a graduate of Session 39. That's another 400 hours of training over 10 weeks from people across the country who are experts in their fields. And this is photography, latent print development, mapping, human remains recovery, everything that we could possibly do we got it in 10 weeks, and we got to train with people from all over the country. I did not get to participate in an international session, but we had people from as far away from Anchorage, North Dakota, Army, CID. I got to train and collaborate with all these individuals.
Did you make networks and have, work studies with peers that you, as you talk about, you could learn more from and bounce ideas off of?
Yes, sir.
Did you do any training locally for people, law enforcement and crime scene?
We would host training at the sheriff's office, especially when we started to get new equipment. Our first one was we got our first Faro 3D scanner. We got that in 2015, the weekend before I reported to the National Forensics Academy. And then again, when we got our infrared cameras that they have at the sheriff's office, we were able to hold training on how to manipulate those new camera systems designed specifically for crime scene investigation.
All right, Michael, going through his credentials, that is a lot of training, more than I've heard from a lot of lead investigators on cases.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I was impressed.
Yeah.
So I would imagine jurors would be impressed. And I think it's a nice way. Now, we often talk about that can be boring, but you lay that foundation, gives more credibility and weight to what he has to say.
Absolutely. All right, coming up, we will have more testimony in the burn pile murder trial for Melody Harris.
Plus, still ahead, new jailhouse calls from Lori Vallow Daybell. What she's now saying really happened to her children, Tylee and JJ. Keep it here on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, prosecutors say she shot her husband and burned his remains on their property. We'll bring you key moments from today's testimony in the burn pile murder trial.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
Sarah Boone is charged with second-degree murder after her boyfriend suffocated inside of a suitcase.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
I thought he was okay.
The Suitcase Murder Trial. Live coverage starting Monday morning, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Back to court in just a moment, but first, new developments in the Lori Vallow Daybell case. The Doomsday Cult mom claims that her daughter Tylee killed her youngest son JJ by accident and then took her own life.
Lori makes the shocking allegations in an undated jailhouse call with her oldest son, Colby Ryan. Here's how a portion of that call played out on Ryan's podcast called The Scar Wars.
When I came in on that scene and they were gone, I thought Tylee did it to get back at me. I thought it was all my fault.
You're telling me that Tylee took JJ's life and then took her own life?
On accident.
Lori Vallow Daybell continued to deny any involvement with her two youngest children's deaths, saying that she fled the scene after discovering their dead bodies, leaving someone else to handle it.
Of course, we'll continue to bring you updates from this jailhouse call as we learn more.
All right, now back to Georgia for the burn pile murder trial.
A 64-year-old Melody Farris is accused of fatally shooting her husband in the basement of their home and then burning his body in a fire pit that was in their backyard.
Farris and her husband, prominent Atlanta attorney Gary Farris, had been married for 38 years, but were sleeping in separate bedrooms at the time of Gary's death.
Prosecutors say that Farris killed her husband for money and to be with the man she was having an affair with at the time.
All right, let's get you back into court now, where the lead investigator is testifying about arriving at the crime scene. Let's go back.
Involved in this case. Were you the lead crime scene investigator in this case?
Yes, sir.
Who all else was, first of all, 2511 Purcell Lane, about what time did you get out there?
I believe I got out there about mid-afternoon-ish, sometime between 3 and 4, I believe.
I got about 15:33 here on my notes, so about 3:30, give or
Yes,
take.
sir.
And when you got out there, what do you remember when you first arrived?
So I remember we went down a long driveway. My deputies had parts of the driveway secured off. We had some detectives there, and I was just told, hey, we have a pile here to the left side of the house we need you to go look at. The detectives really didn't have a firm idea of what was going on at that moment. And I said, sure, we'll walk out there and see what we got.
I did pull up some photographs that have already been admitted into evidence. This is aerial 3. You follow the pointer here. Can you see that pointer?
Yes. You can see the pointer.
When you go up the driveway here, you're talking about you came up and then right here would be the garage and the house. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Much better.
And then the burn pile was back over here in the woods over here.
Oh, it's not there. Yes.
This is aerial 16. I'm going to fast forward. You come around the left side of the house. And what I can do is I'm going to fast forward just to the So it's aerial 16. Basically where this drone is that kind of how the layout from the burn pile to the house? Is that what it looks like? Now this is a year later, but.
Yes, that was, even being a year later, it was still the same distance. Nothing had changed other than we had progressed a year.
If you were to walk from the house to the burn pile, are you going downhill or uphill?
You are going downhill, a slight downhill angle.
Then aerial 17. You got the doors on the left, the ones I'm calling American doors, to the right, the French doors, and then as this keeps turning to the right, the burn pile would be back down that way. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
What did you know you were looking at, or what y'all were dealing with when you first arrived? I know it changes at some point, but when you first get there, what's going on?
So when I walk up to what we called the pile, we have this burn pit. I can still feel heat radiating off of it, and I can see what appears to be a set of skeletal remains sitting on top of this pile. There appears to be construction debris and all this other miscellaneous garbage in this pile, but it's very clear to me that I was looking at a set of skeletal remains on the left side. I immediately got everybody to back out and then started to request additional assets as I'm starting to size up my scene and determine how I'm going to try and recover these remains in a forensic manner.
When you were first called out, what were you respond to a person in need of help, or what was the call?
It was a death investigation that they were not sure what they had.
When you get out there, do you remember the temperature of the taken from the burn pile when you got out there?
I know it was initially warm off me, so one of the things that I did request was have one of the fire investigators come out, someone come out with thermal to give me a temperature. When they were finally able to get out there, it was still over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, with daylight still up at that time.
So still hot?
Still hot.
You back everybody out, then what happens from there?
I requested through my chain of command to contact the GBI and the forensic anthropologist, Dr. Alice Gooding, to get her to come out and assist us with recovering this set of skeletal remains.
And why did you call Dr. Gooding? What was about her that made you call her?
Well, one, she's the state forensic anthropologist. This is definitely well within inside her wheelhouse. And two, I'd never done this outside of a training environment. I did not know what I had. I know I had a set of skeletal remains on a pile. It was radiating heat at over 200 degrees. I don't know how this person got there and how they got to the state. And I'm not so far in my ego to go, I can do this on my own. without calling experts who I know are going to, one, help teach me how to properly document this, but to ensure that we properly document and collect this entire set of remains. And for me, that's important because that person has a family. I want to make sure we're doing our absolute best to ensure that we do this correct, because we only have one chance to do this. And so if I can call help, and that help is here in our state, I'm going to use it.
Had you ever had a crime scene like this before?
I'd never worked a crime scene like this. I have burned 2 self-immolations in my career, and that is suicide by fire. I have worked those, but never one to this scope where I have both fire and skeletonized remains in an area that I know I need to properly document and recover.
Did you know of Dr. Goody, a reputation or anything, or what was it about her that, as you know that she does this type of stuff?
So through our crime scene community, we knew that Dr. Gooding, one, was in charge of the crime scene work at KSU. She's the lead instructor down there. She has been going in with the Georgia Public Safety Training Center and starting to teach similar classes that students would get at the NFA here at the local level for our local crime scene investigators. And a lot of the classes that she had been teaching and that we had been pushing are scattered recovery remains and what we call buried recovery remains. She was able to teach those classes at the Georgia Public Safety Training Center down in Monroe County. She was coming to a lot of our, I had heard her speak at the Georgia IAI conferences because I'm a member of that. And so that's where I started to learn what her mission, what her outlook was. And she said, anytime you need us, call. We all had her number. She made it known that we could call her.
All right, so this lead detective, very earnest, wanting to do the right thing by the family, calling in experts to help him out. And I think rightly so. It's a big issue here, this burn pile. I wonder how the defense is going to deal with it. But right now, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll have more of the direct examination of this lead investigator. So keep it here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott here with Michael Ayala, and we are watching testimony in Georgia, where the defendant, Melody Farris, is standing trial for murder. Prosecutors believe she killed her husband, Gary, and then burned his home at their home in 2018.
Well, the defense claims, however, that the investigation is flawed. They say their client couldn't have possibly moved Gary's 300-pound body onto that burn pile, and that no murder weapon has been recovered from the property.
Let's get you back into court now. On the stand, the lead investigator still facing direct examination by the state.
Recovery, because she was the state's forensic anthropologist, we could call her, and I did.
And did she come?
And she did.
What is she like? What's her personality like?
She's an educator, but she's awesome. She did bring one of her master's candidate students, and she was very nice to ask permission before allowing that master's candidate student into the scene. They are all vetted through her program, so that person is documented in my report. But she shows up with all her gear ready to go. And so I actually had to, tell her, okay, hold on. I got to lay some groundworks for what we're doing because it's still our case. But I did call her for help. But she is super outgoing. She's very easy to talk to. And she started explaining stuff to myself and my lieutenant again, and it started to come back to us as we're laying certain lines to start setting up our recovery. But ultimately, because she's the state forensic anthropologist, I let her take lead on that. That's her purview, because she's also going to catalog those remains. She's going to make sure we document the complete skeleton, and she's going to make her notes because she's going to produce a report for us too, because this is a police investigation.
Growing up, I like to watch things like Indiana Jones, and when they would go to a site and they would be systematic and have little brushes, little picks, and things like that. How would you describe Dr. Gooding's system as she would get in and start doing stuff? What was that like?
Exactly the way I was taught at the National Forensics Academy, because she helped teach up there, and that we do use brushes. What you do see in that is actually real. Had this been a buried, we would have had a 5-gallon bucket, and it would have taken several hours to do this. But we have our lines laid, and everything's broken down into grids, And we don't move from one grid to another until she says it's clear and she's got her catalog going. And so it's very systematic. It's fast, but it's slow, where we can make sure we're accurately documenting everything.
She would take the burn pit, did she divide it into 4 quadrants or 4 sections?
Yes.
And how, would you rope it off, or what were we going to see in the photographs?
So what we do is we start to lay what we call a datum line. That's our north-south line. So you're going to see orange string, and you're going to see it broken into quadrants, and you're going to see arrows indicating north. And what we're doing is we're trying to express in 2 dimensions something that is 3-dimensional. So when we attack a scene like this, we're looking at it on 3 axes. We're looking at it from length, from width, but we also want to show height and depth. That way we can explain how far down certain remains are. And it's more defined when we're actually in a vault recovering from the ground. But we still do it on a scattered, because we want to show how far or how close something is in relation to the central mass, if you will. So if we have a large mass in the center, we're going to say that's the center, and then we're going to measure out and say our furthest point is 6 feet down and 8 feet across. And if I can show you that in 3 dimensions on a picture, it makes it easier than just reading off numbers. And so that's why we lay these lines. We also split it into quadrants to make it easier for us to tackle a large scene so that we don't forget anything.
What kind of tools or things did you use to do this? Did she bring anything?
She brought all her tools, but sifters, buckets, garden trowel, stuff you would find in the gardening center of any Home Depot, Lowe's, or Walmart. That's what we use. Now they're all clean and sterile, and she brings them with her. But it's common tools that you would recognize, except for our sifter. Our sifter is waist level. Each forensics expert builds theirs to meet their needs.
Let's look at some of these photographs here. I'm going to tender into evidence. Is Shaw 1 through 281, and investigator, did you have an opportunity to meet with us and go through all these pictures, the videos, and everything?
Yes, sir.
And were they fair and accurate photographs of what was done at the scene and other things in this case?
Yes, sir.
So, Judge, at this time, I tendered evidence states exhibits, but it's Shaw 1 through Shaw 281.
All right. Objection? No. All right. You admitted?
I'll give you these just in case you they should pop up on the screen here. Let me do that. Judge, may we turn down the lights a little bit for these? Would that be okay?
Still with us, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Franz Borgart. Franz, I was just saying to Michael, how is he able to talk about the qualifications and process of a person who came in to help him with this fire? He testified it was 200 degrees Fahrenheit. When he got there, it was still smoldering. What are your thoughts so far?
So my guess is either there's a stipulation that he can talk about it because she is going to ultimately be coming to the stand. So the defendant enjoys what we call a right to confrontation, and specifically with scientific evidence of this nature where there were studies or experiments or testing done, that person who did it by law has to come and testify. My assumption is they're either stipulating judge or we're going to see that witness soon enough. What I love about this witness, though, is, look, he was very quick to admit that he felt uncomfortable doing this on his own, and that he showed a certain amount of humility and said, look, I didn't want to mess this up, and so I called someone else in because we got one shot. I loved it. I seldom hear law enforcement officers testify that way. So that was wonderful and refreshing. I love the demonstrative evidence we're seeing too, Judge. We have drone footage. I suspect we're going to see some more photos of the actual my hope is that they videotaped what they did when they actually extracted the body. That would be very, very interesting for the jury. But this is 2024 technology. They're taking the jury to the crime scene, and they don't even have to get on a bus, right? The drone is showing them all these wonderful and very interesting things. And regardless of how boring the prosecutor himself may be, this is interesting. I'm at the edge of my seat. I want to see where they're going with this. I want to see, he mentioned Indiana Jones. I'm ready to see what they were doing to extract this body from the still warm soil that was the burn pile. So I think they're doing a good job. I think they're doing a very, very good job. Now, where the rubber meets the road is a good defense attorney is going to cross-examine this witness on what he knows and what he doesn't know. And so they're going to need to put that expert on if they really want it to be reliable from this witness, not only that, but from the other witness as well.
Franz, I got questions about this burn pile. This man was 6'4", he was 300 pounds. He was burned down to basically a few bones, some chips, and a partial skull. The amount of heat and time it would take to get to that point, I was reading up on it, you need to have about 220 degrees Fahrenheit, and you have to constantly accelerate, have an accelerant for the fire to keep it that hot in a burn pit. All of that just raises so many questions to me as a defense attorney if I were representing her. Is that something that sort of jumps out at you?
So the state is going to have to explain, was the body in one piece when it was burned, or could it have been in multiple pieces when it was burned? And if it was in multiple pieces, does that explain how she was able to move it from point A to point B? I've got questions about that, Michael, because, we assume, lay people assume, oh, well, if I've just burned a body, the whole thing would just kind of disappear, right? That's normally what happens when you burn stuff. It turns to ash and disappears. Well, that's not what we're dealing with here. He testified that there were clear human remains. So I need them to explain to me, and this is the million-dollar question, can they testify as to how many pieces it was when it was burned? Or if they can't, is that the inference that they want the jury to draw, which is, well, maybe it was in multiple pieces. Well, if it's in multiple pieces, and you're a good defense attorney, Michael, you're going to say, well, wait, wouldn't there be a whole bunch of blood, or wouldn't there be a whole bunch of forensic evidence to show if she chopped the body up and this, that, and the other? And we don't even have by the way, we don't even have the weapon yet, right? There's a lot of questions about the how. How did this body get over there? How did the body get over there, and how did they burn it? And those are going to have to be answered by the state.
And I think a problem with what the state knows is the remains were found on July 5th of 2018. They're alleging she killed him sometime between the 3rd and the 5th. So they can't even say definitively when he was killed and therefore how long he had to be burned in order to be found in that condition.
Well, let me tell you, if that burn pile was still 200 degrees Fahrenheit, it couldn't have been too long before that something was burning.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You're right. You're right, but that's a long time to say he was killed before actually found in the burn pile. We need to take a break. When we come back, of course, we're going to get you back in for more of the direct examination by the state.
Tonight on closing arguments, prosecutors say she shot her husband and burned his remains on their property. We'll bring you key moments from today's testimony in the burn pile murder trial.
Closing arguments tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
An A-list actor charged in a fatal shooting on a film set.
There is no way for the court to right this wrong.
Victim to verdict with Ted Rollins. Season finale Sunday night, 8/7 Central.
Only on Court TV.
We will get you back to testimony in just a moment, but first in Iowa, the dad in a ditch murder trial defendant Alec Jones, well, he has now been handed a mandatory sentence of life in prison without parole.
Now, you saw Jones's trial played out right here on Court TV. A jury found him guilty back in August of first-degree premeditated murder in the death of his father, Dennis. Investigators say he was fatally shot and then dumped on the side of the road in a ditch.
Before reading Jones's sentence, the judge did hear from his mother, who pleaded to give him some grace. Take a listen.
Never been alone. I just ask you, show
Now remember, there's another trial that's going to happen in regards to this case. We still have yet to hear when Alec Jones's brother Nathan will be tried for allegedly aiding and abetting in their father's murder. We're going to keep you updated right here, of course, on Court TV.
And now let's get back to the murder trial for Melody Farris. The 64-year-old is charged with shooting and killing her husband, Gary, whose body was found in a burn pile outside of their home in July of 2018.
On the stand now, the lead investigator, Chris Shaw. Let's go back into court right where we left off.
Photographs, I may call them States 1 or Shaw 1 or 1, but all these photographs are going to have your name and a number. So Shaw 1, what do we have here?
So with this first series of photographs, all I'm doing is taking overall photographs outside of the crime scene tape.
As you look at 1, as you look at the photograph, there's a pine tree to the right, then is that the beginning of the burn pile?
So this oak right here, that is is directly in front of the left side of the pile, and then that pile extends from that tree over to the right.
This is 2. We'll be moving to the right. 3, 4. Now this stage, there's no really markings or anything. What is this? How early on is this in the processing the scene?
I'm waiting for Dr. Gooding to arrive, but I'm still taking pictures, trying to do something to be ahead so that when she arrives, we can tackle the next task.
But you didn't dive into the pile and start doing anything until she arrived?
No, sir.
Arrived on the scene. 5, 6. Now, was there anything with the pile itself when you first got there that you noticed and thought, here are some things of interest?
You know, other than the skeletal remains, I, for whatever reason, kept getting the smell of citronella, and I don't know why, and that's not a normal smell for me at a death investigation. I mean, I generally smell other smells related to the artifact of death, but I kept smelling citronella, and I was like, did I spill some when I was filling mine at my house? I don't know, but I just, every now and again as I walked around the pile, I could just smell that.
8, 9, just going back. Now, 13, this is looking from one side of the pile, and you said it was still hot to the touch. Was it on one side or certain parts of it that were that way?
So I didn't walk all the way around. When I got close to it, you know, most was just stick my hand. I was like, that's still radiating some pretty good heat. And I own firefighter rated boots because I do sometimes have to go into arson scenes. And I wasn't willing to walk close to that in those boots. I was like, let me see what the actual temperature is. 1, I wanted it to be safe, and 2, I needed to document it because it was still radiating quite a bit of heat for this condition.
How can you compare that? How hot is that if it's over 200 degrees?
Well, we boil water at 212. We can get scalding burns, I believe, between 110 and 160. That's hot enough for me to go, I'm not willing to melt polyester to my skin, and I'm not willing to risk the firefighter rating of these boots. We get an expert out here, see what the temperature is, and see how long we need to wait before we can actually work.
Shaw 14, as I zoom in, what did you notice first when you got to the pile?
So this one, I'm on the left side, and I'm shooting over. I can see what appears to be part of a hand. At the time, what I think is a hand. I see what appears to be part of the rib cage, and I'm starting to orient myself. I see parts of different degrees of what I believe are temperature variations. So when we look at something, we say clothing initially blocks heat. It won't burn evenly. That's what I'm seeing in my head, and I'm trying to figure this out, but I see that it's compact too, and I'm like, okay, is this someone who's fallen over, because I don't see what we would traditionally think of as a full skeleton of a human being. So did someone fall over? Did someone experience some sort of issue that caused them to fall here? All these are running through my head as I'm taking these pictures, trying to process this and think of next steps to go. How am I going to document this and what am I going to look for?
And at this time, you didn't know anything about a bullet in the ribs or anything like that?
No, sir.
15, 16, 17, now we're getting on to 18. And who do we have in this picture and what's going on?
So these are the start of the forensic anthropology examination. So we're marking flags and you start to see wooden stakes go down for our datum lines. And then we have master's candidate students and the deputy coroners in helping to rake and clear while we're taking pictures.
And as you look at the exhibit, Shaw 18, the photograph, I've got the cursor here. It appears that on the right side, there's an angle or it slopes down or goes downhill to the left. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you to Franz Borghardt for joining us this hour.
All right, folks, stick around because coming up, more testimony in the burn pile murder trial for Melody Farris. We'll be right back, so keep it here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala.
And I'm Ashley Wilcott. Thank you for joining us. We are tracking 3 big cases today on Court TV. Doomsday cult mom Lori Vallow Daybell makes a shocking revelation about how her children Tylee and JJ died.
In Florida, we'll have the best moments from the home renovation murder trial of Corey Benderum as one witness compares him to the famed artist Michelangelo.
And in Georgia, witness testimony continues in the burn pile murder trial of Melody Farris. Farris is accused of killing her own husband, prominent Atlanta attorney Gary Farris, back in July of 2018. The couple had been married for 38 years.
Earlier today, a crime scene technician testified about DNA samples collected from the scene, including blood found on a red tractor. All right, let's get you back into court now, where lead investigator Christopher Shaw is on direct examination.
20 is kind of showing the angle that downhill looking up. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, on the outside of the fire pit, there appears to be, is that wood and things that are charred but not burned?
Yes.
Maybe some vegetation?
Correct.
Now, 23, we start to get markers. Now, the A, I know that's going to be renumbered at some point, but what are we doing here in 24? What's this showing?
We are starting to build our quadrants. So we're laying down our north-south line and our east-west. We're also, we have angle indicators on those lines so that if we need to run a tape measure across at one point, we can see what that angle is at that measurement point. So we run the lines and then run the tape. We have our 4 quadrants, but the lines aren't completely square, and we keep it within our boundaries of where we see evidentiary goodies.
And we're going to get into this, but I believe quadrant, it goes top on the right side, A, B, C, D, kind of going in this direction, clockwise.
Yes, I believe we went clockwise that night.
And you see B in Shaw 30 photograph. And then there are some flags that are put down. Are those to indicate things that you just see on the top?
Items of evidence on the top.
Here shows the, Shaw 32 shows the 4 quadrants.
Correct.
So if this is A, B, C, D. And most of the evidence, the remains were found in A and B, is that?
In A and B.
When you were there, did you look for any accelerants?
I did not.
Did you find any, haven't seen gasoline cans or gasoline containers, anything like that?
I did not find any in the area of the pile.
Was there various items, different things, wood, fencing, bottles, cans, trash, all kinds of different items in this fire pit?
Oh, there was, yes, sir.
Now we've got to Shaw 49. Here with Shaw 51, we're going to go into, tell us again, how would you attack each to remove things and collect things? What would you actually do? Did you use a shovel, hands? What did you go down? How did you pick stuff up and how did you sift through it?
So we start with our hands first. It's our most tactile sense. So we're going to start in our quadrant. Someone's writing down. We'll start with the large items that we can see and identify. And then from there, we will start to grab shovels and trowels to pick up areas of ash and debris to go over to the sifter. And those will be transferred from a specific quadrant being documented by the scribe there, and then put in a bucket. From there, taken to the sifter. The sifter is placed over the blue tarps, something that will contrast with us, and then it's one bucket at a time. We'll sift it, look through the sifter, empty the tarp back into the bucket, check the sifter, make sure we don't have anything, catalog, document that, and then we just keep rinse and repeating as we go through these buckets. So everything starts to slow down at that point once we've removed the big items that we can readily see and identify.
When you found an item of interest, what would you do with it? Is there, Dr. Gooding do lay it out, or what would she do?
There's laid out on tarps. However, Dr. Gooding wants to do that. Like I said at the beginning, she's kind of running that. I'm just making sure, one, I'm learning, and two, anything that she needs. But she's running that process. But she's laying stuff out on tarps. She's cataloging the skeletal remains as they're removed, checking on us. I get to do the manual labor. I was sifting some stuff. We're also continuing to rake and make sure that we don't miss anything within that specific quadrant. Once we're done with that quadrant, we move on.
And in Shaw 55, we have these, you see the ground has markings like, was that how that was, or is that something y'all did?
That's from us raking.
Did you notice around the burn pile itself, was there any signs of raking or a tractor had been used for something to clear the land?
No, not around that, because the area on the edge of the burn pile was still green with vegetation.
But did you see that there was evidence that a tractor or RTV was in that area?
Not during this point of the investigation.
This is 57. What's going on here? Is this just an example of what?
We're examining small bone fragments.
58, what is just scooping buckets? Is that how that would work?
Yeah, we're troweling using a dustpan. We're troweling into the bucket. Once we're satisfied with that, it goes to the sifter. We sift it. Again, we look for small bone fragments, items of evidence, pieces of clothing, and lay those out.
Shaw 62, what is this?
That is a picture of our sifter in one of the buckets that we sifted.
And you have a sift, and then the bigger piece will remain on top like this?
Yes, sir. And then we'll go through those with the forensic anthropologist, the master's candidate. We'll pick out the bone fragments. Those will get cataloged. Pieces of construction debris will be examined. If it's not of any evidentiary value, it's returned to another area. Items of evidentiary value are set aside to be cataloged later.
Up to this time in your career, have you been or responded to scenes where a person's body, whether it's alive or dead, a person's body has been greatly demolished, cut up, hurt, broken, otherwise lost to injuries. How many of those have you been to?
I've been to several hundred of those.
And have you seen bones and things like that? Could you recognize certain type of bones, or was the experts able to recognize it much quicker?
They're able to recognize them much quicker, but that's part of my NFA training is a week of anthropology. And I was called many times upon my return by detectives from all over the county. Hey, we found this bone. You know, Fido brought this bone up to the house. Can you look at it? And I had books that I would carry with me to help me identify the difference between animal and human.
Have you worked shootings where people have been shot, actually shot?
Yes, sir.
You ever seen anybody get shot and still be able to move or walk a distance?
Oh, yes, sir.
Like what?
One of the last cases I worked, the shooting victim went 125 feet before he collapsed. He was shot inside a home, collapsed on the street after traversing an outer porch, down a set of stairs, across a very large front yard, till he collapsed in the street.
Have you seen people that have been shot, and even after they've been shot, they'll be able to go a distance or move on their own?
Yes, sir.
How about blood? You see people, different levels of when people are shot and how much blood is there?
That depends on the projectile type, where the person was shot. Did it hit a major artery? Did it hit a bunch of muscle? Did it hit, bone and deflect somewhere? That really depends. And then what were they wearing? Is it wintertime? Are they wearing several layers, or are they wearing a pair of shorts and a T-shirt?
So a different amount of blood, even though people have been shot. You seen that?
Yes, sir.
63, just a sifting again?
Yes, sir.
64?
Still sifting, looking for small.
65?
Same.
And then 66, what are we doing here?
We are at what we call the bottom. We have now hit Earth. So we have recovered all of the burned material, whatever that may be. And so we will scrape another layer just to ensure that we've not missed anything. So we try to go to Earth and then scrape a layer.
You see in the photographs that it's daylight and then it's nighttime. How long were y'all out there?
I believe I watched the sun go down and come back up that particular day. 4 or 5 a.m. is when I finally left the first full cycle of work.
Painstaking process, slow and tedious?
Yes, sir.
67, what are we doing here?
We are running our metal detector. We want to make sure we don't leave anything.
Did you find any blood at the scene out on the burn pile?
No, sir.
Now, as I go through these, this is the blue tarp photographs. What are we doing here?
So we're just documenting stuff that we found within those quadrants.
Now we'll get into these. What are this Shaw 83? What are these photographs of?
These are photographs of the skeletal remains that were recovered.
At some point during the investigation, there was something found in a rib. Do you remember when that happened?
Yes, sir. I believe it was well after midnight when I was made aware that something had been discovered lodged in the rib cage.
138. Did you remember how it was described by people at the scene, what was found, how they refer to it as?
I don't remember I don't remember if they said it looked like an eraser or, I don't remember what exactly they came and told me. I do remember they said, hey, we found something, you have to come look at this now. I said, okay.
What happened from there when that was found?
So I walked back down to the pile where they're working. Dr. Gooding and her team are still working. Investigator Olenek, who was taking my picture, says, Sarge, here you go. And I went, that looks like a projectile. Everybody stop what you're doing right now. I had to explain to Dr. Gooding, ma'am, I need you to stop for a moment. Everybody stop. Went and got one of the detectives. I believe I went and got Lieutenant Clark, but I know I let Lieutenant Ballard and them know. Say, hey, we've got a projectile. We also had to stop and let the coroner know at this point because now we've just changed our dynamics of our investigation. And so we had to take a hard pause while the detectives figured out their next steps. And so I had to wait for them until we could.
We need to take a break. When we come back, Investigator Shaw continues testifying about evidence found at the crime scene, the projectile he just mentioned. Stay here with us on your front row seat to justice.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, prosecutors say she shot her husband and burned his remains on their property. We'll bring you key moments from today's testimony in the burn pile murder trial.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Tell me in your own words, and in as much detail as you can, what happened that night?
We'll get you back into court in just a moment, but first, let's bring in trial attorney C.K. Hoffler. C.K., thank you for being on with both of us, coming back this afternoon. Tell us what you think. I mean, the burn pile, this is significant. This is the biggest piece of evidence. The body's found there. He just starts testifying about, there's a projectile in between ribs that changes this to a murder investigation. How compelling is he?
I think he's quite compelling. Actually, before he even talked about the projectile, I thought he was compelling in the way that he told the story and presented the evidence. So I think it is compelling. I think this is for sure the state's most significant evidence. And this is where the defendant, and I'm watching her expressions, where she really is looking a little bit more uneasy. But she pretty much doesn't have a lot of expression, but she's looking uneasy during this period, as well she should look uneasy. So this is what converts this case to a real interesting case. And so if they can connect the dots and take it right back to her, I think that she will be convicted by this jury, because her expressions, she doesn't convey a sense of, she would not have a lot of sympathy, I would predict, in a courtroom. But her expression did change slightly when this evidence was being presented.
Yeah, now connecting it to her, CK, is what I think is the problem here, right? At the end of the day, the burning pit on the body and pieces of the body found in the burning pit on the property, I think suggests one of two things, right? Somebody who was in that house, somebody on that property did it. There are two people sort of out there. So the question is, and I've been racking it around my brain, is that necessarily helpful to her? From a defense point of view, the fact that somebody in the house must have done this, the state's claiming it's this other guy, the state's claiming it's her, the defense is claiming it's this other guy, her son, Scott. So you know one of the two of them are at least probably involved, or someone in that house involved. Does that help or hurt her?
I think it helps her that there's another person that's involved, but what's very difficult is that is her son. So because it would appear that she might have more motive. It's going to turn on what evidence they have. They've got to establish some type of motive. It's got to be more than they had an estranged relationship, because it appears that both of them were having affairs. They had an open marriage. I mean, that's, I think, the term that people use. So if they can establish some motive for her, then I think they will connect the dots more to her. it's difficult to envision that a son would do that to his father. Of course, it does happen. We've seen other cases like that. But we have to see what kind of evidence they can have. They can't just say, we believe it's a son because he was in the house. He was on the property as well. She has more of a motive than the child would have, although we haven't seen any evidence yet that could suggest that he would have motive. So I don't know. But I think more likely than not, the jury's going to think that she's responsible.
And
because she's an estranged spouse.
She is, but I also think there's an argument to say she's having an affair, he's allegedly having an affair, they're sleeping in different bedrooms, they have an open marriage. So why is that a motive? She can do whatever she wants as it is. Why get rid of him?
Yeah, I think more so money might have been the motive at the end of the day. And what the defense said, at least in their opening statement, is that they're going to have tons of texts for the kids asking for money all the time.
Yes.
Dad, I need money for this. Dad, I need money for that. Maybe they got
Good
tired of
point.
asking for money as well. All right, CK, stand by. I want to get folks back to court now. Lead investigator Christopher Shaw continues testifying about the human remains and other evidence found at the crime scene.
You were investigating a death.
Correct.
But now you're investigating possibly a murder. Is that how it shifted?
Yes.
Did you find any gun? So if it's a suicide, you respond to a suicide. What do you look for?
The same things I look for in a homicide. We'll try to look for defect. I'm looking for angle of entry, back spatter. A gun location doesn't necessarily mean anything to me because I've had suicide victims do weird things with guns. A note, sometimes I find them, sometimes I don't. But I know in a relatively short amount of time if I'm working with a suicide or if I'm working with something else. This case was unique because, yes, we had a projectile, but it was still in a set of burned remains. So the best thing to do was to stop and get everybody on the same sheet of music at this point.
Shaw 166. What? Do you remember finding this?
Yes,
Seeing this?
I remember seeing that.
Now, came back out at some point and we're working this scene, but there's a photograph taken of a tire mark in Shaw 174, and in relation to where everything is at, in Shaw 174, when you look at these tire marks, what is at the top of the picture?
That's the pond they have on their property in between the main house and their pastures and their barn out to the far right.
This is 177. And the pattern there has a unique pattern. We're going to look at this pattern on the tires in RTV later on. And then I believe there was a dive done to look for the gun in the pond.
Yes, sir.
Were you there for that?
Yes, sir, I was.
After you were worked the burn pile, you actually did some other things while you were at the scene. So were you able to go home on, so July 5th, Thursday, you probably worked into Friday morning, July 6th. Did you able to go get some sleep, or did you come back, or what'd you do?
I think there was 2 or 3 hours where I was released and then came back
when you came
Friday, finished the pile. Cherokee Fire Search and Rescue was in the pond. We completely sifted the pile. We also did line searches of the area behind the pile while the detectives were inside the house doing their searches.
Let's see, 170, let me look at someone. Let me jump. I'm going to come back to it. It looks like...
You know, Judge, I was thinking, it's interesting. But no,
What's interesting to you, Michael?
What's interesting is, you know, the state is sort of putting some hay in the idea that they were living or sleeping in separate quarters. They had affairs. I bet if you took a poll of all the marriages that were 38 years, I'm not sure there wouldn't be quite a high number, a high percentage that would maybe in that same situation.
I am not participating in any such poll. However, I am saying I do agree. I don't think it's that significant.
Yeah, especially the fact that he had a CPAP. And,
especially that. Most people I know can't sleep with that noise going on next to them.
Absolutely right. All right, but folks, we're going to take a break. Before we do that, we have an update in the Dad in the Ditch murder trial in Iowa. Today, Alec Jones was in court for sentencing. His mother was the only person to speak in court. She became emotional when asking the judge for mercy for her son.
Never been wrong. I just ask you, show me some mercy. When you came to yes, no more.
The judge then addressed Jones and issued his sentence of a mandatory life in prison without the possibility of parole sentence.
Jones was convicted in August in the shooting death of his father, 55-year-old Dennis Jones, whose body was found in a ditch. After sentencing, Alec Jones was let out of court in shackles. His brother Nathan is also charged in connection with the murder. He will be tried at a later date.
All right, folks, want to take that break now. When we return, the lead investigator continues his testimony in the burn pile murder trial going on in Georgia, so keep it right here on Court TV Live.
I'm Matt Johnson in North Georgia covering the burn pile murder trial. This is Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott.
And I'm Michael Ayala. We are continuing our coverage in the burn pile murder trial in Georgia. Melody Farris is accused of killing her husband and burning his remains on their sprawling property in Georgia.
Prosecutors say that Melody and her husband Gary were arguing about finances when she shot and killed him in the couple's basement. His remains were found in a burn pile on their property.
The lead investigator in the case is now testifying about evidence found at the crime scene, including blood. So let's get back into court.
Work on the ballot process and the scene, some of the scene, I believe, or was...
Yes, sir. Those days started to run together.
Okay.
But I was out there for everything that I have.
And we're going to get to the photographs here, but to July 6th, looked like you came out and there was a blood stain that you thought some interest on the front door on the floor.
Yes, while we were still working in the pile and I had the fire investigator was collecting some items, I was asked to go in and assist CSI Thrasher and CSI Eckerd with some stains that they had located. My command asked me to give it a second look and do some documentation and some field testing.
And then you, there was one stain, there was actually a window, and there's 4 things that you looked at, but it looks like you field tested the stain positions number 1 and 3. Do you remember doing that?
Yes.
And then I guess they were tested for mammalian blood using a OBITS test?
Hexagon OBTIS test.
OBTIS,
yes.
okay. And did stain number 1, was that positive for blood, mammalian blood?
I believe that one was, yes.
And this test that you used, what is it and what is the OBTIS test?
And so it's what we call a field presumptive test that we can do at a scene to see if a stain that we're looking at, 1, is blood, and if it is blood, if it's mammalian blood. So we'll use these at a scene to eliminate certain stains and then prioritize collection of other stains.
And then you also, on the 6th, I believe, found a deer camera near the burn pile?
Yes, while we were doing our walks, I saw a trail cam sitting on a trail leading behind the pile to the left down a well-worn path, and it was walking a ranch fence.
What do you mean by that?
the post fence with the wire to keep cattle or horses separate. I call it a ranch fence.
And did you collect that and SIM card and things like that from the camera?
Yes, I did.
I believe on July 11th of 2018, you came back again, and this is where you were helping. Well, I guess this was at the sheriff's office. Y'all took some items back, and you helped Lieutenant Ballard process the shirt that we're looking at.
Yes.
I think a shirt was originally found in the house as we're looking at Shaw 178. Is this that maroon shirt that we're talking about?
It is.
And then I believe for the sleeve, at some point y'all took that and had it sent off to the GBI. Is that right?
I did not do any further processing after what I did in the lab. I know we did note some stains and let the detective know there was some stuff there that could be sent off. Right. I don't recall if it was ever sent off.
We've stipulated to the report, so items were sent to the GBI and tested.
Oh, yes, sir.
188. This is a picture on the thing on the front of the shirt. What did that look like to you?
To me, at first breath, it looked like a scorch mark.
Consistent with soot or something from fire?
To me, it just looked like a scorch mark. It was something that was important enough for me to document. So I wanted to make sure that my case detective knew, hey, this is here.
All right. And then there was a OBTI test done on the shirt for blood. And what is this? It looks like a pregnancy test, but tell us what this is.
So this is and this was done at the house. This is in our lab. So what you see is the testing vessel of the hexagon test. It uses a cotton swab and a liquid in the test kit. You will swab the suspected blood stain, collect that on that swab, and then you'll clip it off into the fluid. It's a phenolphthalein style solution. Give it a good shake, count, and then you'll break off an end. You'll pour it into the area marked S, it's that trough, and then you wait. And so the first line you'll see is the control. That tells you, hey, the test is working correctly. The second line, the T, that's your positive for mammalian blood.
So the control C and the T here. And then some shoes were taken from the house, 2 pair of Nike shoes, is that right? And that's what we have here?
Right.
And then the ones here, these blue Nike. And did y'all notice things on these?
I saw what appeared to be some suspected blood stains on the shoes that I wanted to test.
And is that what this OBTI test is here?
Yes, we did one at the scene, and then we did some more follow-up in the lab.
Now, the Shaw 211, when you came back, I believe the 7th, check my notes, the 6th, the next day, so July 6th. This is the front door here, so as we're standing here looking towards the kitchen table area, we're talking about this area on the floor here, is that right?
Yes.
Shaw 215, is this the spot we're talking about?
Yes.
That was 1, and that was tested positive for blood?
Yes.
Again, going back, I believe the 11th, we all bring evidence back to the sheriff's office, and we're going to be processing some evidence here. Where is this actually at the sheriff's office?
So this is at our headquarters building in the old section of our jail at 498 Chatton Drive. We have the bottom section, which was our old staff dining, that we converted into our lab.
Again, the shirt. What do we have here?
And so I've put this shirt under an alternate light source. I'm just looking at it.
And this is 232 for the record, sorry.
I'm looking at it under UV light. UV, blood is the only liquid in the body that doesn't fluoresce under UV light. It's going to turn brown. All I'm using this for is to help locate.
We are going to step aside for a moment, but up next, lead investigator Christopher Shaw continues testifying about the blood found at the scene, including some found on a tractor on the victim's and defendant's property. That'll be next when Court TV returns.
Live ammunition have made it onto that set. An A-list actor charged in a fatal shooting on a film set.
Several members of the crew were already upset with the safety conditions.
This was an unspeakable tragedy, but Alec Baldwin committed no crime.
You need to be well aware of what is in this gun.
There is no way for the court to right this wrong.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rollins. Season finale Sunday night, 8/7 Central.
Only on Court TV.
Welcome back, folks. Before we head back to court, I want to bring back in our guest, still with us, trial attorney C.K. Hoffler. C.K., you know, the state is going for a malice murder charge here. I think if they're able to prove that she was involved, do you think that they have enough for malice murder? And the only reason I think they do is because there was a gun involved, and for her to get the gun and shoot him, one would think it wouldn't have been something that was sort of this act of passion or in the midst of a fight. It would seem that where he was shot, or at least where they think he was shot and how it was done, it would have to have been something that was done with malice.
No, I tend to agree with you, Michael, in that assessment for the reasons that you stated. But additionally, if they can really link her to it, then there had to be malice. By definition, because of the fact that she shot him, because of the fact that he was burned, because of the way that these crimes that they suspect were committed, you have to have had malice to do that. So I think by definition, they could prevail on that, again, if they're able to connect the dots to her directly.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, this case is something else. All right, let's get you back to court now for more testimony from the lead investigator, Christopher Shaw.
That I need to pay attention with when I take pictures or do any field presumptive testing.
Then brought the shoes back too?
Yes.
And then you and Lieutenant Ballard processed I believe the RTV, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And swabs were taken from, looks like the RTV, the L2 shifter, the shifter up here on the steering wheel, I believe. The swab was taken from there, GBI item 25B, and that was taken and sent off to the GBI. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then also y'all tried to look at and process the Kubota, is that right?
Yes.
Now notice the tire marks on the Kubota tractor. Now this type of tractor, is it one of those kind of easy to drive? You press forward, it goes forward, press back, it goes backwards?
I don't know anything about the operation of the tractor, but I know this one is not one of the models I'm used to where you have to run the handle up on the top side and engage the brake. But as far as the movement, I'm not familiar with it.
But you see the pedals here on the right?
Yes, sir.
This says Shaw 264. What do we see here?
So we're looking at a chemoluminescence reaction with the application of Blue Star onto the hood of the tractor closest to the fuel filling station.
Looks like something in 264 is blue here as I point to it, and blue below it here. What is that? And there's some blue over here.
That's an indication of blood.
Could it be something else?
There are instances of false positives with Blue Star. However, when we see those, we'll see those pop like fireworks and then fade away very quickly. Blue Star lasts longer in its chemoluminescence than the other chemoluminescence that we would use. And so not only is it glowing, but you can see where it's attached itself to any trails of blood as it runs. So we know this to not be a false positive. It's an indicator that there could potentially be blood there.
Is your reputation as a crime scene investigator is important to you?
It's very important to me.
If somebody, not that they would do this, but if someone is there and just says, take a fast picture of this or something like that, are you going to let anybody tell you how to process evidence?
Not on my case, no, sir.
No, you're not going to just, if it pops real fast, get a real quick picture, are you?
No, sir.
Now, we've got some photographs here. We're going through the RTV. Now, as we get into, this is 268, we'll get into things here. We're going to try to do something. All right, if you would, Judge, with your permission, I'd like you to step down and actually show how we do these. But this is 268-1. This is 268. Can you see it very clearly? Looks like just darkness, doesn't it?
Yes, but I can see it because I'm attuned to it. But yes, it is a dark picture. When we shoot Blue Star, it has to be dark.
Now, this is 268.1, which is the same thing. If you don't mind, come down here and show the jury how you can use the shading to make it pop.
You want to drive with the mouse?
Yeah, I'm going to let him drive, Judge.
That'd be fine.
So this is 268.
So inside Windows 11, they basically have a free version of Lightroom, which is what I used at the sheriff's office. And so for pictures where we want to do some basic lighting adjustment, if we're shooting in an altered light, we can come over here to the adjustment side. And here we look at brightness, exposure, contrast, our highlights, our shadows, and we can move these slides all the way to the left, all the way to the right until we get whatever we want to be exposed. And so I'm sorry.
Yeah, the soft voice, go ahead and speak loud.
Apologize. What we'll do is we'll move these sliders left and right until we get the desired exposure that we want, so helping to kind of clean up, if you will. We're not actually changing the photograph because we don't save it to the original image. It will always be a copied image. And so for these, when we started to, we were pulling out the brightness in our exposure, and then we'll take our contrast and we want to see how it goes. So we're going to run it all the way to the negative to get it to come up. Our highlights wasn't really doing anything, but our shadows. And so we would run that for those photographs to bring it up. And I know your screen, you can't really see it, but there is
I want to try to do something with the remote. My screen looks completely different.
Yes, sir. It has to. It probably has to deal with the tie-in, but I assure you that there is a change on a computer screen where we can then save it as a copy. And so in this instance where you see parentheses and a number, that is a saved copy. And then we can further explore that inside our metadata and make sure that we haven't altered an image. But that's how we do that in the Windows program.
All right, thank you. If you have a seat, I'll go through that, and I'm going to cancel it because I'm not going to save this one.